She has stood in front of a camera 6 times. She has never once asked for the car back. That car, her brother-in-law's car, the last vehicle to carry her mother alive, sat in a federal evidence lot for over 40 days. And not one word. Not from Annie. Not from Tommaso. Not for anyone in that house. A 30-year FBI veteran watched every video the other sister made. And when it was over, he didn't talk about the masked figure on the porch. He didn't talk about the engineered camera blackout or the backpack or the blood drops on front steps. He walked away talking about the silence. That silence is where tonight begins. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because what we do here every single week is go past the press conference statements, past the carefully worded public appeals, and straight into the verified forensic record. Cases where the official timeline and the investigative evidence are not telling the same story. Cases where the details that never make the evening news are the ones that matter most. This is one of those cases. Stay with us, because by the time we reach the end of this story, the question a former FBI profiler asked on national television will not feel like speculation. It will feel like the only conclusion a 40-day evidence trail could possibly support. But before we go anywhere near the evidence, before we talk about the masked figure on the porch or the engineered camera blackout or the car that sat in a federal evidence lot for over 40 days while a sheriff gave 2 contradicting accounts of where it was, before any of that, you need to know who Nancy Guthrie is. Because she is not a headline. She is not a supporting detail in a story about someone more famous. She is the center of this. She is the reason any of this matters. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She lives alone in a brick house set into the Catalina foothills on the north side of Tucson, Arizona. If you have never been to that part of Tucson, picture this. Quiet streets lined with desert landscaping. Homes with clean driveways and well-kept yards. The kind of neighborhood where residents know each other by name, where garage doors close at reasonable hours, where the loudest sound most people hear after 10 o'clock at night is the desert wind moving through the saguaro. It is the kind of place where nothing is supposed to happen, where people move precisely because nothing happens. Nancy chose that house. She chose that neighborhood. She built a life there that reflected everything she valued. Deep faith, family, routine. She raised her children in a home where Sunday mornings meant church without exception, where dinner was a deliberate ritual, where the table meant something. People who know Nancy describe her laugh as the kind that carries through walls. Sharp wit, warmth that fills a room. The kind of woman who, at 84, still showed up, still participated, still kept her commitments. She also has limited mobility. She wears a cardiac pacemaker. She takes daily prescription medication, and if that medication is missed, the consequences are serious and escalating in ways that do not leave room for error. She is a woman who requires a degree of routine and consistency that most people her age rely on completely. She is also the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, a woman whose face appears in millions of American homes every single morning before most people have finished their first cup of coffee. And investigators would later note, in the course of building their profile of this case, that the famous daughter may not have been incidental to why this house was targeted. It may have been the reason. Sit with that for a moment, because it changes the entire architecture of what follows. Saturday, January 31st, 2026. It begins like dozens of other Saturdays in Nancy Guthrie's life. A family dinner at her daughter Annie's home, approximately 4 miles from her own house in the Catalina foothills. Annie is Nancy's other daughter, Savannah's sister, a quieter presence in the public narrative of this case, a detail that will become important, deeply important, as this story develops. The dinner is routine on the surface, ordinary, the kind of evening that does not announce itself as anything other than what it appears to be. Nancy arrives at Annie's house by rideshare at approximately 5:32 in the evening. She does not drive herself. She relies on others for transportation, and that evening, the person who will drive her home is Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni, Savannah's brother-in-law, a 6th-grade science and biology teacher at Basis Oro Valley School in Tucson, a man who, by every public account available at that time, was nothing more than a devoted son-in-law doing what devoted sons-in-law do, making sure the family matriarch got home safely after dinner. At approximately 9:45 in the evening, Tommaso drives Nancy home in his blue Honda CR-V. A 10-minute drive through the quiet Catalina foothills. Per the Pima County Sheriff's Department's confirmed timeline, he pulls into Nancy's driveway at 9:48. He waits. The Pima County Sheriff himself, Chris Nanos, confirmed to the New York Times that Tommaso ensured Nancy was safely inside her home before he left. The garage door descends at exactly 9:50. Tommaso's headlights sweep across the quiet street, and then they disappear into the dark. Nancy Guthrie is alone inside that brick house. That is the last verified, documented moment anyone can place her there alive. Now pay attention to what happens next. Not because of what occurs, but because of what is not. Nothing. 4 hours and 17 minutes. Nothing on any accessible camera captures a single verifiable moment of what is happening inside that house. The neighborhood is dark. The street is still. And somewhere between 9:50 in the evening and the early hours of the following morning, everything changes. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie's Google Nest doorbell camera registers movement at the front door. And it goes dark. Not a battery failure. Not a system error. Not a technical glitch on a cold desert night. Someone disconnected it. Physically. By hand. Deliberately. That disconnection is the starting point of everything investigators would spend the next 40 days trying to reconstruct. And here's where the first extraordinary detail of this investigation emerges, because that footage, the footage from that camera, should not exist. Nancy did not have an active cloud subscription for her Nest system. Without cloud backup, footage is gone the instant a device loses power. The moment someone pulls that camera offline, the recording vanishes. Permanently. Irrecoverably. That is how the technology works, and whoever disconnected that camera almost certainly knew it. But the FBI did not accept that. Working alongside Google's technical teams, investigators spent 11 days, excavating back-end server architecture. Residual data cached in systems that most users never know exist. Fragments of information stored in infrastructure so deep in the back end that it requires specialized forensic knowledge even to know where to look. And against odds that the suspect had every reason to believe were insurmountable, they found something. 6 still photographs. 3 short video clips. Recovered from a camera someone was certain they had permanently silenced. FBI Director Kash Patel announced the recovery publicly on February 12, 2026. 11 days of forensic effort to pull back the curtain on a moment the suspect believed was gone forever. What that footage showed gave investigators their first hard look at the person they were hunting. A male figure approaches Nancy Guthrie's front door in dark clothing. Black gloves. Black sneakers. A ski mask covers his face entirely. Black fabric with openings cut for the eyes and mouth, appearing slightly lighter in the infrared capture of the Nest camera's lens. On his back, worn over both shoulders, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking pack. That backpack is sold exclusively at Walmart. The FBI flagged it immediately as one of the most significant physical leads in the case. His build is average. Forensic video analysis placed his height between 5'9" and 5'10". And he moves toward the camera with a deliberate, unhurried pace that behavioral analysts would later describe, publicly and on the record, as inconsistent with impulsive conduct. He is not rushing. He is not hesitating. He moves like someone who has done this before. Or, at the very minimum, someone who has rehearsed it. He reaches into the front yard. He pulls out a piece of vegetation. He uses it to cover the camera lens. Then he disconnects the device entirely. Step by step. Methodical. Sequential. Every movement pre-planned and executed in order. And there is something else visible in that footage. An object in the suspect's front pocket. Former law enforcement analysts examining the footage described it as resembling either a handheld radio or a signal-disrupting device. That single detail, that object in a pocket, would become one of the most debated forensic questions in the entire investigation. Because when investigators returned to the surrounding neighborhood in the days following Nancy's disappearance, they went door to door with one very specific question. Did you experience any disruptions to your internet connection on the night of January 31st? The answers were consistent. Multiple neighbors confirmed connectivity issues during the overnight hours. One neighbor told investigators that his Ring camera, the device with the closest sight line to Nancy's property, positioned to capture her backyard directly through a fence line, showed a gap in its recording history during the precise window corresponding with her disappearance. Not an error message, not a technical fault, just a gap, marked simply as not available. That camera was not alone. Devices mounted on fences, garage exteriors, back porches, cameras that collectively should have provided a comprehensive visual record across multiple properties throughout the entire night, went dark. A coordinated dead window, a deliberate blind spot, engineered to cover the precise hours of the disappearance. Forensic experts consulted by NBC News were direct about what this implied. Producing that kind of coordinated outage across multiple neighboring properties, reaching the backs of lots beyond buildings and fencing, would require a professional-grade signal disrupting device. Equipment that requires deliberate sourcing, technical knowledge, and advanced preparation. Not the kind of thing you pick up at a hardware store on the way over. A damaged utility box located around the corner from Nancy's home was also identified by the sheriff's department as part of the active investigation. Physical infrastructure damage consistent with an external attempt to interfere with local connectivity. The kind of detail that, on its own, might mean nothing, but in context, alongside the camera gaps and the neighbor reports and the object in the suspect's front pocket, begins to form a pattern that investigators could not ignore. Not every expert agreed on the mechanism. Morgan Wright, a cybersecurity and law enforcement analyst, told Fox News Digital that a commercially available signal-disrupting device typically carries an effective range of only 10 to 30 yards, and that producing outages across multiple neighboring properties would require significantly more powerful equipment, operating at far greater capacity than anything easily obtained. Wright also raised a pointed forensic counterargument that stopped analysts in their tracks. The footage recovered from Nancy's own Nest camera appeared clear and intact. An active signal-disrupting device positioned directly at her front door at the moment of recording would most likely have degraded or eliminated that footage entirely. The clarity of the recovered images was inconsistent with active disruption at close range. Retired Detective Lisa Miller assessed the object visible in the suspect's front pocket differently. She told investigators and analysts reviewing the footage that it was more consistent with a handheld radio, a communication device, which raised a question that has been quietly present in the investigative conversation since the very first week of this case. Was the masked figure on that porch the only person operating that night? Because if that object was a radio, and if someone was on the other end of it, then this was not a single individual acting alone in the dark. This was a coordinated operation with multiple moving parts, and someone, somewhere, was managing those parts in real time. But here is the detail that removed any remaining doubt about the level of planning involved. CNN sources, citing investigators with direct knowledge of the case, confirmed something that reframed the entire nature of this crime. The masked figure on Nancy Guthrie's porch had been there before. Earlier footage from a separate date, a separate occasion, shows the same individual approaching the same property along the same path to the door. No backpack that time. No ski mask, but the same build, the same gait, the same unhurried approach. Physical reconnaissance. A deliberate dry run conducted in advance, on a different day, before the night he chose to act. This individual stood at or near that property, studied it, mapped it, and came back. In Walmart, responding to a formal request from the sheriff's department, provided investigators with purchase records for Ozark Trail hiker packs sold across its retail network in the months preceding the disappearance. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that surveillance footage from local Walmart locations was being actively reviewed. The backpack, he stated, was one of the most promising physical threads in the investigation. Now sit with the complete picture this portion of the case has assembled. A masked individual arrives at an 84-year-old woman's door in the middle of the night. He has been to that property before on a separate occasion to study it. He knows exactly where the camera is. He arrives with vegetation in hand to cover the lens before disconnecting the device. He may be carrying equipment capable of interfering with neighborhood connectivity. A utility box around the corner is damaged. Multiple neighboring cameras show gaps in their recording history during the same window. And the FBI spent 11 days recovering footage from a back-end server the suspect almost certainly believed no longer existed. This was not opportunistic. This was not random. This was not a crime of chance. This was an operation. Someone built this plan. Someone sourced the equipment. Someone conducted reconnaissance. Someone mapped the camera network. Someone knew this woman's schedule well enough to time this down to the hour. Someone knew this property, its interior layout, its camera positions, its security blind spots, well enough to approach it without hesitation. That someone did not find this information by accident. And that question, who provided it, is the question that has sat at the center of this investigation since the morning of February 1st. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with the words, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Around 2:30 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker sent its last signal to her iPhone. That detail was confirmed by Fox News Digital and cross-referenced against the Pima County Sheriff's investigative timeline. The device went silent. Not gradually, not with warning. It simply stopped transmitting. Investigators logged it as a fixed anchor point in the minute-by-minute reconstruction they were already building. And by sunrise, that anchor point had set federal resources in motion in a way that would transform this quiet residential neighborhood into the center of a national investigation. By late morning, Nancy had missed her scheduled church service livestream. She never missed it. Not once. A member of her church noticed. They contacted the family. Relatives drove to the house at approximately 11 in the morning. They searched the home. They walked the surrounding property. No sign of her. Around noon, the family called 911. Deputies responding to the residents noted immediately that something was deeply wrong. Nancy's phone was still inside the house. Her essential medication was still inside. Her personal belongings, the things a woman of 84 would not leave behind, could not leave behind, were exactly where she had left them. The conditions at the property were described by investigators in official communications as very concerning and inconsistent with a voluntary departure. And then forensic processing of the scene confirmed what no one in that family was ready to hear. Blood drops recovered on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, confirmed by law enforcement as belonging to her. She did not walk out of that house. By February 2nd, the Pima County Sheriff's Department publicly announced that the case had shifted from a missing persons search to a criminal investigation. Federal resources were already deployed before that announcement was made. The neighborhood that had been so still and so silent on the night of January 31st was now surrounded. Agents on the street, news vans at the perimeter, forensic teams moving through a house that 24 hours earlier had been nothing more than a quiet home in a quiet part of Tucson. And at the center of every investigative thread, every question, every piece of evidence being logged and processed and analyzed, one name, one moment, one driveway, a garage door descending at 9:50 in the evening, and the man who watched it close and drove away into the dark. Now here is where the investigation takes a turn that the press conferences did not capture. Here is where the silence begins to speak. There are two sisters. One is everywhere. Television screens, Instagram posts, press conferences with cameras rolling and reporters leaning in, weekly public appeals directed to whoever took her mother, a $1 million reward announced with every major network carrying the feed, 6 videos in 31 days, grief broadcast to millions of people who woke up every morning seeing her face before they saw anyone else's. That is Savannah Guthrie. The other sister is nowhere. 22 consecutive days of complete public silence. No press conferences. No direct appeals. No cámara evidencias. No public statements issued through representatives or attorneys. No social media. Nothing. That is Annie Guthrie, the woman whose home Nancy visited the night she disappeared. The woman whose husband drove Nancy home. The woman whose house the FBI searched not once, but twice within the span of 4 days. Take a moment with that contrast, because a 30-year FBI veteran did. He watched every piece of publicly available video connected to this case. He reviewed every public appearance Savannah made. He reviewed the absence of any public appearance from Annie. And when he was done, he was not talking about the masked figure on the porch. He was not talking about the camera blackout or the backpack or the blood on the steps. He was talking about the silence. The first FBI search of Annie and Tommaso's home occurred on February 7, 2026. The second followed within 96 hours. Investigators executing a federal search warrant entered the residence. What the FBI's forensic extraction team recovered during those searches has not been fully disclosed. What is confirmed, on the record, sourced, verifiable, is that the warrants were executed, the searches occurred, and Tommaso Caione's vehicle, his blue Honda CR-V, the last vehicle to carry Nancy Guthrie, was seized and placed into federal evidence. Here is where the official record fractures in a way that cannot be explained away. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, standing at a press podium, told reporters publicly that Tommaso's vehicle had been processed and returned. 14 days later, at a separate press conference, his account had changed. Law enforcement sources, cited by multiple national outlets, confirmed the car remained in the evidence lot for over 30 days. Not two interpretations of the same situation. Two contradictory statements, made by the same official. On the record, a 30-year FBI veteran noted it the day it happened. Every behavioral analyst who reviewed the timeline noted it. Every journalist covering the case noted it. And through all of it, through every press conference, through every public appeal, through every carefully worded Instagram post Savannah filmed through the lens of everything she already knew, not one word was said about getting that car back. Not from Savannah. Not from Annie. Not from Tommaso. The car that carried their mother. Their wife's mother. Sitting in a federal evidence lot for over 30 days. And the silence around it was complete. Savannah Guthrie has known the shape of this investigation since the morning of February 1st. She knew who drove her mother home. She knew about the searches of her sister's house. She knew about the vehicle in the evidence lot. She knew what the FBI's forensic teams were looking for inside that house and inside that car. She knew what a former FBI behavioral analyst said on national television after reviewing every video she had made. And she stood in front of cameras 6 times and said none of it. That is not a judgment. That is a sequence of documented choices preserved in the public record in the exact order in which they were made. And it sits alongside Annie's 22 days of silence like two halves of the same answer. Every investigation begins with the same first question. Not the most complicated one. Not the most technical one. The simplest one. Who was the last person to see the victim alive? It is not an accusation. It is a procedure. It is the first thread pulled in every missing persons case from the smallest county sheriff's office to the most specialized units inside the FBI. In the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, that question has had the same answer since the morning of February 1st. Tommaso Caione, Annie Guthrie's husband, Savannah's brother-in-law, a 6th-grade science and biology teacher at Basis Oro Valley School in Tucson. A man who drove his wife's elderly mother home after a family dinner and watched the garage door close at 9:50 in the evening. That answer has not changed once. Not in over 40 days of active federal investigation. And yet his car sat in an evidence lot for over 40 days. The FBI searched his home twice in 4 days. And the family of the woman he drove home has never publicly asked for any of it to be explained. Now here is the forensic thread that connects every detail this case has produced back to the same central question. Who gave the masked figure the information he needed to plan this? He knew the interior layout of that house. He knew the camera positions. He knew this woman's schedule. He knew the precise window of hours that would pass before anyone would attempt to contact her. He knew the neighborhood well enough to map its camera network in advance. He had visited the property on at least one prior occasion to study its approach. He moved without hesitation, without confusion, without a single moment of uncertainty visible in the recovered footage. Strangers do not move like that. People who have been briefed move like that. People who receive detailed, accurate, specific information about a target before they arrived move exactly like that. The question investigators have been working towards since the first hours of this case is not only who the figure on that porch is who handed him the map. And every verified, sourced, on-the-record detail in this investigation traces the same path back to the same address. The same house, the same family dinner, the same driveway, the same garage door closing at 9:50 on the night of January 31st. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. And the 40-day evidence trail this investigation has built, piece by piece, detail by detail, contradiction by contradiction, leads somewhere specific. The profiler who spoke on national television named it. The FBI veteran who reviewed the footage named it. And the silence, the sustained and deliberate silence of everyone closest to this case, except one famous daughter standing in front of a camera, names it too. The investigation is active. The questions are open. And the answers, when they come, will land exactly where this evidence has been pointing since the beginning. If Nancy Guthrie's name means something to you now that it didn't at the start of this video, if this case has stayed with you the way it has stayed with everyone who has looked closely at the evidence, leave a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel, because we will be here every step of the way until there are answers. Nancy Guthrie is not a headline. She's not a footnote. She is a mother, and she deserves for every one of us to keep saying her name.